All right, guys. Thank you very much for joining again. This is the eighth version of Virtual GupShup. From the last two Sundays, we were not able to continue the sessions. The reason was one Sunday we had virtual dreaming across the globe, and the other one was scheduled for the students community. So we are back here, and we will continue, doing these sessions every Sunday. Uh, we would be also announcing our certification voucher announcement next Sunday. Thank you very much, Saon, for joining us and volunteering for the session. So, guys, this is the third session for our first time speakers. So, congratulations, Sean, and all the best. And
Thank you.
anybody who feels they can contribute and want to speak on this platform, if you're a first time speaker, we encourage you and to join this and learn something out of the COVID situation. So thank you very much, Sean, and we'll start the session now. And post the session, if we get some time, let's chat a little
Yeah.
about life as well. Yeah. All right. Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Vinay. Thanks a lot. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Saon Kumar Dash. I'm currently working with Barco Electronics. I'm having a total of 9.4 years experience in IT, and I have worked in multiple CRM technologies like in Oracle and also in Salesforce. So now, in today's topic, what I'm going to cover is like SSO, SAML, and JIT handler. And thanks once again, Vinay. Thanks for giving me a chance to this platform to share my knowledge. Yeah. So this is the topic we are going to discuss. It's a huge topic, like single sign-on, SAML, and JIT handler. And what I have decided today is like I have broken the total session in a couple of sections. So in first section, I'm going to talk about what exactly the SSO is, what is SAML, and how it is related to SSO and SAML, how those are interrelated. And then I'll be talking about JIT handler, where you can put some custom logic. And then I'm going to talk about, like, for demo purpose, in the session, what I have already done some setup at my end to give the demonstration. And after that, I will configure the entire setup, like for authentication to the SSO, authentication as an SSO using SAML XML. And again, as in custom logic, I will create a new Apex class to handle the SSO authentication. And then we'll cross-check the overall functionality, like the overall topic. And then we can go for Q&A. Okay, guys, so let's start. Yeah. So in introduction, I'm going to talk about SSO and SAML and JIT. And so what is SSO? So SSO is nothing but a authentication scheme for multiple applications. So if I talk about SSO, it's a common implementation which is done over the organization, not only in Salesforce. I would say most of the organizations and technologies using SSO authentication scheme. So if you're talking about so the full form is single sign-on. What does it mean? So single sign-on means, like, whenever we are going to authenticate to any application, and you want to authenticate that application using the help of or the credential with other application. So that time it comes into the picture how you're going to authenticate those two systems. So there, consider like application 1 and application 2, both are having two different credential for a particular user. Like, I have my LinkedIn profile, I have my Salesforce profile. So while logging into Salesforce, what I want is I am going to log in using my LinkedIn credential. So it's nothing but the concept of SSO comes into the picture over here. So what I'm going to discuss over here is, like, as per SSO, there are certain criteria and certain things we need to configure and we need to cross-check and to configure as well, so that the SSO of application can work without any issues. So the advantage of SSO is it's a simplified login process. So while giving the demonstration, what I'm going to do is, like, I don't have any ADFS account as of now. Like, if I talk about Barco, so Barco has its own ADFS accounts, and it will hold my credential for my corporate account, my corporate ID. And I can't use that ADFS of Barco while logging into Salesforce as of now, because I'm not using Barco Salesforce account. So here I'm using my own developer account. And what I have done is, like, to demonstrate that, I have used another Salesforce org, which I'll be using at part of ADFS. Okay. So in the next point, I'm going to discuss about SAML. What is SAML? So SAML is like security assertion markup language, which is kind of an XML-based standard data format for exchanging the authentication and authorization. So consider there are multiple system or applications to, to authenticate one system using the credential of other application. You have to have some standard data format which will exchange the token or the details, so that you can log into the application one. So for that, so here as of now, we are going to use two parties, like one is identity provider, another one is like a service provider. So here the identity provider, the value of identity provider is it validates the authentication process based on some criteria. Like consider my mail. Like I have particular mail ID using for LinkedIn profile. That particular mail itself, it will use for login into the Salesforce. So LinkedIn here is like a service provider. Sorry, identity provider. My mistake. And service provider is like, which is providing you the service after authentication, which is like Salesforce. And coming to the next point, it's like the JIT handler. So what is JIT? JIT handler is basically related to the Salesforce. It's nothing to do with any other technology. So it's completely related to Salesforce, and Salesforce have its own process to, put some custom logic while, authentication of the credentials. So it's a time provision of SAML, I would say. So it's like whenever we are authenticate using SAML, so that time itself, JIT handler will come into the picture. I'll showcase one demo itself for the JIT handler using some custom logic, so you will better understand that part. So here I have also mentioned, like, this is the automatic onboarding process. So what does it mean? So consider, like, you are holding an account in your corporate ADFS account. Like consider in Barco Electronics, I am holding my Barco username and password. But while using the username and password of Barco, I'm logging in Salesforce, and Salesforce doesn't have that particular user credential. So what I want is, like, whenever I'm logging in with my Barco credentials, I want sales in my Salesforce org, the same credential needs to be created, like the user data should be created. So it's like an onboarding process. So one example I'll showcase, like, how this onboarding can be done in JIT handler. Okay, let's proceed further. Okay, so I have just given one line of intro for ADFS. It's like Active Directory Federation Service. It's kind of a software component developed by Microsoft that can be installed on Windows Server operating system to provide users with single sign-on access. So what I mentioned is, like, yeah, ADFS is really necessary. Consider, like, you are using an identity provider for any org or any application. So that time you can use any ADFS kind of technology. Like, there are multiple ADFS technologies as of now in the market. So there are Azure, you can use Microsoft ADFS server. So that also you can use. So right now for our demonstration, we are going to use ADFS as in Salesforce. It will not exactly be Salesforce ADFS, but it will be like the user which will be present in Salesforce 1, and I'm going to log in Salesforce 2 org. Yeah. So yeah, let's proceed further. I'll give you a demo. You will better understand that time. Yeah. So what is the need of ADFS and SSO? So the advantages are, like, it's a one central system to monitor credentials. So consider, like, you are using consider like 10 applications, and it's really hard for any user to, you know, provide, or I mean, create some 10 credential for 10 applications. So using ADFS and single sign-on, what we can do is, like, we can create the credential only in one application, and while logging to the other 9 applications, we can use the credential of application 1. So it's like a central system credential. So in that time also, consider like the maintenance will be very easy for the user and for everyone. So consider like one password, if it is want to be, you know, reset it, or you need to modify the username password. So you can just modify one application, and you can use all other application using the modified credential of application 1. So that's why it is really easy to maintain. And yeah, another is like reduction of IT cost. So it's like whenever you're using one application for logging into the multiple application, it's like you are uh, uh, not I would say, you will not contact any IT services, like for resetting the password of multiple applications. What you can do is, you can just, if you have any issues, you can directly contact one application IT support. They can help you with all the application you are going to log in. Yeah. So coming to the next slide, guys, you can hear me, right? Vinay, you can hear me? I'm good, right?
Yeah, we can hear you. You are
Yes,
perfect.
yes.
Okay, okay, okay. So here, as a prerequisite and consideration for the demo, what I've done is like, in the ideal case, it's obvious like ADFS account should be there. Until and unless you have a requirement, like from sales, you have two different Salesforce org, like consider like you have Salesforce Dev and you have Salesforce UAT, and from Dev itself you want to log into Salesforce UAT, which is a very rare case scenario in practical project, I would say. But in real case scenario, it's like you have a one active directory in your corporate world, like in your corporate organization, and you want that particular active directory to be used in all other applications you want to access inside the corporation, inside the organization. So that time ADFS is pretty much required. In here, we don't have ADFS. I would say like you can also go through ADFS using Microsoft Windows Server or maybe Azure. You can configure and check the same thing. It should work like that way as well. And so as per prerequisite, what I have done is like I have two Salesforce org. I have set up the domain of those two Salesforce org, and I have done I'm going to use Federation ID in. In next slide, you will get to know what exactly Federation ID is and how I'm going to use that. So here I have set up some users as well to authenticate. So that's part of my prerequisite. Okay, so next go to the next slide. Okay, so here I am going to configure the complete setup. So I have, let me go back to my Salesforce org. Yeah. So I have configured two Salesforce org. So I have one is like service provider. I have given the domain name as service. You can see, and another one I have as a provider, which is like a identity provider. So basically, my user will reside in this org in provider, and I'm going to log in service. I'm going to use this service URL using the credential of provider users. So for that, what I'm going to do is I need to set up the complete, I need to do the complete steps to configure complete SSO and SAML authentication process. So let's do that. So as of now, if I go to users, let me just show you what I've done. Okay. So this is the user, and for this user, what I have done is like I have set a Federation ID. So Federation ID is nothing but a user field. So here I have populated some value. Consider this I have put as sstars@gmail.com. Okay. So now let me go back to certificate. You can go to setup and you can search for certificate and key management. You can go to it over here. And what I'm doing is I'm creating a new certificate over here. Consider my certificate name is, I'm giving a name. Consider my certificate name is my SSO certificate. Okay. So automatically the unique name will be populated, and the key says I'm mentioning as 4028 itself, and the private key is checked. I am keeping it as it is. I'm just clicking on save. Okay. So you can see this certificate is saved and created. Okay. So I'm just downloading this certificate. Okay. Let it be downloaded, and next I can go to identity provider. So it's like in the setup, you can search for identity provider. Okay. So now you can see like you have the identity provider, and what I'm going to do is I'm just edit this identity provider, and from the identity provider drop down, I'm going to select the certificate that I created just now. So I'm selecting the certificate and I'm clicking on save. So now this is my identity provider. You can see the Salesforce identity provider URL has been modified, and this is the URL, and this is nothing but a XML, in the format of XML. And if I open this URL, I can see like there is a certificate which is having some encrypted data. So you can see that this is nothing but an encrypted. Okay, I'll discuss regarding this encrypted data again later. So let's just go back to the your provider, and after this identity provider is set, I'm going to copy this identity provider URL, and I'm just keeping it for reference. I need it later. So I'm just copying this, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to open my another org, which is like my service org. So what I'm going to do over here is like I'm going to set up, and I'm searching for remote. So I'm going to remote site settings. Okay, so I'm clicking on new remote site settings, and I'm giving the remote site name as consider like provider remote. Okay, and this URL should be the URL of the domain of your Salesforce org provider org. So here, like as per the org, my URL is this. If you can see the issuer domain, and here also the domain name is like my domain provider tab. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this, and in my service provider URL, service provider org, I'm going to save this URL as a remote site settings. So why I'm doing this is because whenever you are going to access this domain from this org in service provider, so this is like you have to configure the setting so that you can access the provider org. So I'm clicking on save. 1 second. Okay, it will not take space. Okay. So my remote site setting is done. So now what I'm going to do is I'm again going back to setup, and I'm searching for single sign-on. Okay. So you can see like in single sign-on, I haven't done anything yet. It's a complete new DevOps, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to enable the single sign-on. So I'm just selecting the SAML enabled, and I'm just clicking on save. And here you can see like in SAML single sign-on settings, there are 3 buttons, which is having like new and new from metadata file and new from metadata URL. So let me go back once again. So here also you can see in the identity provider org, in identity provider, I have download certificate and download metadata. So let me download both of them. Oops, it was blocked. Let me download again. Okay. So if you can see, this certificate is having, the format is like, the extension is basically CRT. And let me open it in Notepad. Okay. So you can see in the certificate, you have some encrypted data, which for me, like, I don't know what exactly it is. So let me just go to one browser. I'll go back to my browser, and here I can check. I have one URL where you can basically decode that uh, decode that encrypted key. So here in this URL, I'm going to paste exactly the certificate encrypted key. So let's just check what exactly it has inside that. So you can see, like, it has the name of the certificate. It has the organization name. It has the organization unit, which is nothing but the organization ID, and couple of other things like the validity and the serial number and the issuer. So those kind of details is basically having in this encrypted key. Okay, so it not really necessary. It's just for your understanding. I just showed like what exactly the encrypted key value is. So let's just close that. It's let's just go back, and I'm going to my service provider org. So here you can see, like, we have metadata new from metadata file, and another button which is having new from metadata URL. So also I have downloaded I suppose I have downloaded the metadata file as well. Yeah. So let me open this. Yeah. So you can see this XML file, which is having, the metadata details, which is also having some kind of certificate data, which is kind of an encrypted format. So if you also, just check in that particular URL to decode that particular, this particular encryption data, you will find like the details of the certificate itself. Okay. So that's the knowledge I want to share over here. And you no need to do anything, like no need to modify, certificate or maybe the metadata file as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create this uh, the single sign-on configuration using the metadata URL itself. I'll be using the URL because automatically the data will be populated. Otherwise what you can do is, like, you can create new, and in that case you have to fill those details manually. So that also you can do, not an issue. But here I think I'll go with this metadata URL. So I am going back to my identity provider, and you can remember, like, the Salesforce identity URL was generated in identity provider of the my first domain. So what I'm going to do is, like, I copied that particular URL and I paste that URL over here, and let's just click on create. Okay, so now you can see the details has been populated automatically. Okay, so now we can see, like, the API name and the name and the issuer. So if you can see, the issuer is having the value of, my domain provider itself, which is nothing but the, domain URL of my first org. Okay, so this value has been populated, and the entity ID you can see, which is also populated by default, and this value is nothing but the URL, basically domain URL of your service provider org. And now I'm going to select, like, this is keep it as 256, and this assertion decryption certificate I'm going to select. It's fine. I think there is no need to modify anything over here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the federation ID as part of our authentication process. So I'm going to select this as federation ID from the user object, and also, like, the identity is the name identifier. So for our case, it will be like in the subject statement rather than attribute element. So I'm going to proceed with selecting this subject statement itself. And this identity provider URL also, that has also been populated. You can just have a look, like the login URL, identity provider login URL is the URL of the first, first Salesforce org. Yeah. So let's just click on save. Okay. So our single sign-on settings has been saved, and basically, so just for recap, so what I've done is so far, it's like there is an identity provider. For our identity provider, what we have done is like we have created a certificate, and that certificate from the identity provider, we have selected that particular certificate, and then we have got some URL which is like identity provider URL. And in the second org, what we have done is like we have enabled SAML, and also we have added the remote site settings, which is having the value of your first org, so the domain name. And then what we have done is like we have created a SAML single sign-on settings using that URL which got generated in the first org. So my details is already populated, and you can see the login URL and logout in URL that has also been generated automatically. So now my next approach is let's go back to the first org, and what I'm doing is I'm searching for the app manager. Okay, let's create a new connected app. So this connected app will be basically used for authentication purpose using the SAML. So let's create the connected app. Then I'll tell you like how exactly it is going to work. Okay, so this connected app name, consider like SSO app. Okay, so consider, let's provide my contact me phone. Okay, you can provide any sample image or URL. Consider I'm going to use this logo URL. This is not mandatory, but yeah, I'm just going to use any of those. Okay. So now you can see like you have your connected app having an option like SAML. So I'm going to enable this SAML checkbox. So once this SAML checkbox is done, you can see like you have a kind of entity ID field and ACS ID field. So what I'm going to do is this entity ID, which is we can get it from the other org, which is over there, and from the single sign-on settings, I'm going to copy the entity ID and put it over here. And the ACS URL, so it's nothing but the login URL. So it's like the assertion consumer service. So it's basically the URL in which you are going to log in. So it's basically we are going to log in the service provider service. So here I'm going to put the login URL. And in the subject type, I'm going to put federation ID, as because I have selected in my service provider org as well as in SAML identity type as federation ID. So here also I'm going to put the same subject type. Okay, so now you can see the issuer is also populated by default, and which is nothing but the domain name of your first org. Okay, and you can see like the IDP certificate is there, and I'm going to use the same certificate which I created earlier. So I have selected certificate option as well. Now let's just click on save. Okay, my connected app has been created, and now let's go to manage. Now you can see there's multiple profiles. I mean, there is a profile option. Let me just click on manage profile, and let me select the system administrator profile. Along with that, I'm going to select, standard platform user, or also standard user profile as well. Let's just click on save. So basically, I'm selecting this profile option as because this will basically help you. Whatever user is having any of those profile, they will be able to log in using this connected app. So yeah, so that's the logic behind this. So now let's go back to my service provider org, and here I can search my domain. Okay, so in the authentication configuration, let's just click on edit. Yeah, so you can see like the authentication service is having also another option, which is having my domain provider dev, which is the domain of your provider org. So I'm going to select this checkbox as because we are going to log in using the provider org. So I'm clicking on save. Okay, so this is done. So now what I can do is like, I just wanted to show you something. So in user, yeah, so this is my user, and in this user as well, you can see the federation ID. I have kept it like sdas@gmail.com, and if I go to my previous org, let me search the user. So let me open the admin user, and here also you can see the federation ID. Okay, so the thing is like why I have put the federation ID of provider org and service org same. So the logic is like, let me just explain you. The thing is like, consider this is a user. So this is a user, and consider you have your Salesforce org. So this is your Salesforce. Okay, so basically what I want is like user wants to log in the Salesforce using some other application's credential. So let me draw another application which is like kind of here we are using Salesforce, but it's like ADFS. So basically ADFS is storing your username password of username password of your credential details. So it's basically having the username and password, and user is trying to log in from browser to Salesforce. So basically user is trying to log into Salesforce, and what Salesforce is doing is like Salesforce is basically sending the details to ADFS. So it's like user is basically trying to log into Salesforce, and Salesforce is sending the details to ADFS. It's kind of a redirection. So what will happen is like ADFS will authenticate the whole thing, like your credentials, what user is providing here in the ADFS directory. So once the authentication is completely done, so it will basically send the SAML request to Salesforce. So that's why I put like bidirection. So it will basically send the SAML request over here, and SAML file to Salesforce, and Salesforce will have a single sign-on setting. It is having SSO setting configured at get send, and it will basically verify the SAML file over here, and it will let the user authenticate finally in Salesforce. So this is the flow. So now we have done our configuration. So let me just go back to uh, go back to connected app in my provider. So my connected app name was SSO app. Let me just open this app. So you can see the IDP initial login URL has been generated in the connected app. Let me just open this and let me just have a look whether this is opening or not. Yeah. So you can see like, yeah, this is opening correctly. So you can have a look like my IDP initiated login URL is having, my domain provider, which is the domain URL of this, your basically Salesforce one. And when you are trying to, hit on this URL, it's basically redirecting you to some other URL, which is like your service provider URL, isn't it? So basically what is happening right now, it is opened already, as because I am already, logged in the service URL. So what I'm going to do is like, let me just log out. Okay. And I have closed all my, let me just close this one as well. Okay. And it's okay, fine. So I'm opening a new browser, and here what I'm going to do is I'm going to open the service provider domain. So this is my, Salesforce service provider org, where exactly I'm going to log in. So you can see like we can log in using your Salesforce credential. We have username and password field over here, and we have a login button. You can definitely provide your username and password over here, and you can click on login. It will authenticate your service provider using the Salesforce credential. But along with that, we have another option, which is saying like you can log in using the SSO provided authentication, which is having basically login to the provider URL. So basically, if I click on this, so you can see like the URL is has changed. So initially, like it was like our service site URL, and now whenever I'm clicking on this my domain provider URL, and this is getting changed. So it's basically the URL is now basically your dev one, and here the credential I'm going to give is like the username password of the of my dev one. So let me put the password. Okay, let's click on login, and you can just have a look. Okay, I need to provide the verification key. Yep, I got the key. Let's click on verify. Just have a look in the URL. So it's having, my domain, your provider URL. And now just have a look over here. Just see the redirection happens, and it is finally, taking you to your service provider URL. So we have been, I mean, using, we are trying to log in this URL. We for credential authentication, what we did is like we used another Salesforce org, which is having different domain and different users, and here finally we are landing to the our service provider browser, like the URL. Now, if you can remember, like I showed earlier, like the user is having the federation ID. So the need of federation ID here is like the user of both of the systems are having a unique ID, which is nothing but the federation ID. Like consider you are trying to log in to Salesforce and you're using your LinkedIn profile. So in that case, there must be some parameters, or something which should be unique and identical to both the applications. So probably in that case, they are using the mail ID. So here in our case, so what we are going to use is like we are using federation ID. Okay. So if anybody has any doubt, you can ask me now. So I have done I have shown the configuration setup completely, and I'll cover this JIT handler part now. So yeah, any question, guys?
Learning portal.
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm.
for a
Okay.
testing, I just used a Federation ID, but it's not possible to configure the Federation ID for each and every user because it's not a good way. So I just use a username. So I think it's
Okay.
just a confirmation. Please just confirm that. I think it's a good idea to use a username and password instead of Federation ID. Am I right?
uh, I mean, I agree with you, but partially I would say. But because
Okay.
for our project, we are using Federation ID, which is a unique in
Okay.
Salesforce org. So in our case, it's a mandatory, like Federation ID must be unique, and it should have a value. So
Hmm.
we are like in our project, it is absolutely fine. I mean, we are using Federation ID, and we are just authenticate our users using ADFS of our corporate ID, and the same corporate ADFS, Federation ID is getting created in Salesforce as well. So every
Yep.
time it's become, same. Yeah. So
Okay.
it's basically depends on your requirement. Yeah. How
Yeah,
do you want
it's
to
depend
configure
on
it?
the requirements. So, okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So now the thing is like I'm going to show you one more thing, like the JIT handler part. So let me just go back. Yeah. So the purpose of JIT handler is basically, whenever we are using SSO and SML, like SAML, so that time what happens is like in Salesforce, we can put our custom logic over there. So consider like we have a requirement, like our ADFS account is having, my user details. So consider like this Salesforce org is serving as an ADFS account, and my user details is provided like this. Okay, and this user is having in Salesforce provider, this domain provider, but my other service provider is basically not having that particular user. So what I want is like consider like whenever I'm trying to logging in my service provider. So I don't want to use I can't use Federation ID because the user is not present over here. So what I want is like let the authentication process take place on provider URL, provider org, and after authentication is done, when the SAML request is getting from ADFS to Salesforce, what I want is like in Salesforce, I want to create the whole new user or maybe contact, and also maybe account you can create or any other things, like you want to put some custom logic on that. So how we are going to do that? So in that case, we are going to use JIT handler. So what I've done is like let me just open the developer console. Okay, so I have created one Apex class. So it's basically implements auth.saml JIT handler. So this is like Salesforce provided interface. So I'm basically writing a class which is implemented that particular interface. Yeah, and this you have to be make sure like this this Apex class is having, I mean, global accessibility, and as because you're trying to authenticate this Salesforce service provider URL from outside world. So that's why we have to put it like global. And this methods, like you can see like the create user, and you can see like update user. So these methods are nothing but the user, I mean, methods of this interface. Okay. So this is by default functionality, I mean, which is provided by Salesforce, and you can put your custom logic over here while authentication. So here I have put some logic. So this update user is called when your Federation ID is already present in your service org. So in that case, it will find the user, and in that case, this method will be called. And in that case, in case where federation ID is not matching, automatically it will go to the method of create user. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is, like, in the create user, I have put some logic. So it's nothing but some hard-coded value, you can say. But as of now, just for demo purpose, I'm going to create a user which is not present in my service URL. I mean service org, and it is having a username and the federation ID is basically coming from the parameter. You can see like. The federation identifier is coming from the SAML request. So basically that SAML XML value, in that value itself, there is a parameter called federation identifier, and the same federation identifier parameter we are going to insert in user level. Okay. And also I have provided some mandatory fields and some optional fields as well, which is needed in user. Okay. So let's now my Apex class is ready. I have already just I just need to put the Apex class over there. So for that, what I'm going to do is, like, let me go back to my single sign-on. Guys, notice like I'm in my service provider org itself, where my single sign-on settings was configured. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm editing this SAML single sign-on, and here you can see like I'm going to check this user provision enable. Okay. So now you can see like there's an option called custom JIT provider. Okay. So here my this SAML JIT handler, it's nothing but a box which will be linked to your Apex class. So my Apex class is like SSO SAML JIT handler. So I'm providing this Apex class over here, and this execute handler as I need to put it as your admin. So me being an admin, I'm just selecting that particular admin user. So whenever this SAML request will land this service URL, so it's basically at last it will execute this Apex class where your custom logic could be put, and it will run as a admin. Okay, let me just quickly save this. Okay, fine. So now my single sign-on got updated. Let me just quickly open user. Okay, so you can see like I have only system administrator user configured. Other than that, by default user created user is there. So let me just log out from here. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is, like, I'm opening again the Chrome browser, and I'm going to log into the domain again, my service domain. Okay, so I'm going to use my SSO credentials, and here in this case I have created another user which is residing in my provider org, and it's having username this. Okay, so I'm going to provide that. Oops, it got logged in. I have to log out 1 second. Probably this one also. Sorry guys, let me open this. I hope this time I will not log in. It's just taking my cache in. Okay, fine. So I clicked on my single sign-on settings, and you can see like it is redirecting to my domain URL, like the provider org. And here in this case, I'm going to use the user which is present in my provider org, but not it's not there in my service org. Okay, so I am providing the credential which is related to completely to provider org, and I'm clicking on login. So you can see it's asking for verification code. Let me get the verification code. Yep. Let's click on verify and just notice the URL once again. So it's taking me to again, redirecting me to again to the service org, and you can see like the service org, the user is logged in the service org, and if you see, like, yeah, I can see like the JIT handler user is logged in, and if I open, okay, this one is not having Apex Plus access. So basically what I'm trying to say is, like, in the JIT handler itself, I gave the username as JIT handler, so that's why, like, the user is created and this user automatically logged into the service provider. So now what I can do is, like, to verify once again, I can go to setup and I can check the user. Okay, so you can see, like, yeah, this is the user which is created just now, and the details was provided in the Apex class. So I manually provided the profile name. I mean, yeah, and also the email and the username, first name, last name. So everything was provided manually. And so basically, this is the steps you can do. I mean, there are many companies which are basically configuring the same way. Like, you have the ADFS account, and while logging into the Salesforce, they don't want to create the credentials of users in Salesforce manually. So that's a good approach you can follow using JIT handler. Yeah. So from my side, I think, yeah. So as of now, yeah, functionality also we have cross-checked. Yeah, overall I'm done. Yeah, now we can.
Hi. So quick question here. So I saw, like, in
Sure.
Apex class, you gave a bunch of hard-coded, like, credentials for the username or whatever. So is there a
Yeah.
way in that interface that can grab, like, the person is logging into one org, right? Can it not grab it directly from the person logging in's credential? Because I saw a couple of things. Number one, which got me interested, is that you are running in as a system administrator. So
Yeah.
will that thing affect in my Apex class? I mean, what I want to do is, rather than hard coding these things here, can't we just grab it from for a user credentials who is logging in on the first org? Is there a...
Yeah, absolutely, Rahul. I mean, yeah, absolutely, you can do that. So the thing is, like, if you can see, like, I just opened my Apex class. Let me just copy this. Yeah. Let me open it in Notepad. Oops, I can. Okay, you can see my screen. Is it visible?
Yep.
Okay. So you can see, like, this interface, having two by default methods. So if you can see, like, update user is having, I mean, those kind of parameters which is provided by the interface itself, by the methods itself, and those parameters having particular value, like like community ID, portal ID, and attributes. So like here, as for example, what I've done is, like, I have done this, I mean, hard-coded value, but yeah, to answer your question, definitely you can do that. So the thing is, like, your provider, your provider, as in like, this might have been, I mean, here in this case, like, Salesforce, but in case of, like, you're having ADFS, your ADFS provider should be passing the parameters in such a way so that you can grab those details in the class, and you can create the user accordingly. So, like, you can see, like, attribute, in attribute it's a map, variable type is map, and here in this case, like, attribute, I'm just for demo purpose I have created like this, but your ADF is supposed to provide the details. So in that case, you will grab all the details and dynamically you can put it. Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah,
this update user is the method which ADFS can call actually and provide dynamic values.
No, actually, they will not call the this method. So what I'm saying is like whenever you are logging into this dev 2, I mean the service. So in that case, just before logging in, you can see like the parameters, the SAML parameters will be passed over here. And these parameters will, after landing to the service provider org, it will pass to the to these methods, update user and create user.
Okay.
So in this methods, the parameters like the XML parameters will be, you can calculate according to your requirement.
Okay.
So so ADFS is not calling this methods exactly. It is just sending the details to the org. Yeah. So in the org itself, you're just capturing the XML file. I mean the XML file having those parameters and values, and you're just processing that in this JIT handler
JIT
class.
handler methods. So any call by ADFS will have, obviously will have these attribute values which you can use actually rather than.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, based on your requirement, you can modify that as well. Yeah.
Makes sense. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, Rahul. Okay. Anyone else? Anyone is having any other questions?
Yeah, Neelam this side. Hi.
Hi, Neelam. Hi.
So my question is, if from your previous topic that in my organization I need to connect the third party with my tool. So if if there are more like 1 lakh community users, so how can I deal with the federation ID? Should I configure all for all 1 lakh users, or what should I do in that scenario?
So you have like 1 lakh community users, you're saying, right?
Yeah. Yes. In that scenario, what should I do? I need to configure for all those. And
yeah. So
what should I do in that scenario?
no, the thing is like federation ID, you are not going to configure it. Like I mentioned, like what you're doing here is like you can use some JIT handler class. So in that case also you can use your custom class in which basically, the federation ID, if it is there, it will be automatically captured from the parameters and you can use it later. And for community perspective as well, it's not mandatory, I mean, basically the community SSO setup can also be done. I was thinking like to give a demo over here, like for the community, but I don't have that much time. But yeah, for community also, you can use the single sign-on and you no need to configure the federation ID for that. It's not like an individual user you are going to create and, configure the federation ID for each and individual user. It can be done automatically.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any more questions, guys?
Shan, this is Shantanu. Yeah, actually,
Hi, Shantanu.
I wanted to know one thing actually. So in our project, actually, apart from ADFS, we are using Octa. Okay. So for the configuration wise, what exactly we need to concentrate on other aspect for to establish that SSO, if you can just guide us in that respect.
Okay, so I have not used Octa for sure, but what I can say is like SSO thing is not completely related to only Salesforce. It's such a common practice. It's been used in SAP. I mean SAP, Oracle, Salesforce, or many other technology as well. So in that case, like your Octa will be your ADFS standpoint. I mean the platform, ADFS platform, the Octa. And user is trying to log into Salesforce. In that case, you have to configure your single sign-on in Salesforce in such a way, and which will basically require the certificate details, which you are going to set up in Okta. You're getting like you have to set up your certificate over here, and yeah, so those certificate you have to configure such a way, and you have to share in Salesforce in such a way so that your single sign-on setting is configured correctly, so that user can definitely log into Salesforce. So it depends, Santanu, frankly speaking, like based on your ADFS technology, I mean, someone can use, Azure, or someone can use Microsoft Windows Server. So in that case, like the ADFS configuration and SAML configuration all depends based on your usage. Yeah.
Okay.
You can reach out to me. I mean, if you have any specific doubt, I mean, probably you can reach out to me Twitter or in LinkedIn. Not an issue. We can discuss. Okay, guys. Anything else? Sure.
Uh, can we connect Gmail using single sign-on without any code?
So if you're talking about like Gmail connection in using single sign-on, so I think whenever we are when we log in Trailhead, so it says like, yeah, you can use your Salesforce, you can connect with your using Gmail. Yeah, we can do that. Definitely, we can do that. Yes. So that functionality is already there. But if you talk about your Salesforce org, yeah, there could be. I mean, without your custom Apex Plus also, you can do that. I suppose. Yeah, I have never done that, but yeah, we can do that for sure.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyone else?